Evening, wherever you are in the world, welcome to the Corporate Jet Investor Town Hall. It's great to see everyone. Just to remind you, it's available on all your most popular podcast apps, and we're also delighted to have the Air Law Office sponsoring this week. So thanks very much to the Air Law Office, and let's start with Kerri Dowling from the Air Law Office. Kerri, how are you?
I am well, Al. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. It's great to be sort of meeting, even if it's virtually. So a lot's changed in the last year. How are transactions different now?
I guess part of it is, I was going to say, how are they not different? But of course, the mechanics of the transactions don't really change over time. But from January of 2020 until today, it's really been an education in how to manage expectations, manage teamwork across the aisle, and knowing when to take control of a transaction. So while the mechanics of the transactions have remained the same, it's really learning a new, well, the now normal, as has become the key word or the tagline of 2020 and into 2021. So it's really a lot more hand-holding, I have found. Not sure how everybody else has been doing it, but seeing the new buyers. New buyers ask a lot more questions. You know, gone are the days where the buyer says, "This is the airplane I want, put me in it by this date, and let me know when you need something." Now you need to really walk clients through every single step, which is your job, but it's just a different way of approaching a transaction.
And we've seen a lot of developments where people are doing inspections using cameras, and we've seen digital signatures. Do you think we'll go back to the old days, or have things moved on?
I think two different answers to that question. In the inspections, I think we'll probably go back. I think that the cameras to do the inspections is a great tool, and it's a tool that will always be available. But there's something about having an individual there and helping manage the maintenance. As for digital signatures, I think they're here to stay, and I think that when the lenders are finally drug kicking and screaming into e-signatures, then I don't ever see us going back to ink signatures as a rule.
And I think the theme of today is going to be managing expectations. But how is it when you've got a new buyer coming in and you've got the uncertainty? So you've got a new buyer who thinks they should be able to get their aircraft tomorrow, and then you've got the uncertainty of having probably more than you've ever had in your career, where you don't know if you're going to get a pre-purchase inspection done. How do you manage that expectation from buyers, sellers, and new first-time buyers?
So this is an incredibly good question, and a question that I would not have expected to have before January of 2020. Now, I think that the teamwork across the aisle is really important for managing those expectations. And this is a roundabout way to answer your question, but I need, if my client doesn't have a broker helping walk them through the transaction and managing their expectations with regard to the technical aspects, because I'm not a mechanic, I'm not an A&P, I'm not a broker, I'm not a flying pilot anymore. So if they don't have that conversation of, I apologize, I meant to turn that off. If they don't have a broker having the conversation with them as to what type of equipment they can afford to maintain on the long term, then I need to have that conversation with them up front. That's not something we really did I really did that much pre-January 2020, because a lot of these new buyers don't know what they're getting themselves into.
And are you finding that participants are working together better as a team? Has COVID brought everyone together?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have had more transactions in the last 6 to 8 months where I can have candid conversations with the brokers and the technical reps on the other side of the aisle, because the goal is to get to the end of the transaction. Everybody's super busy right now, and everybody's managing multiple transactions back to like the 2008 days, and with the exception of one or two rogue agents, everyone is really working together to get the clients where they need to be.
So would you actually say that deals are running more smoothly now?
I would. That's my experience. My experience is that everyone is acknowledges the issues and is working together. Yes, absolutely.
Do you think that will stay? Do you think transactions are going to be less confrontational?
I mean, I can hope. I think, I think there are probably people that circulate in the same transactions over and over, people you run into over and over. But that's always been true. So I don't know, Al, that's a hard question. Let's say yes. Let's be positive and say yes.
One of the things that causes a lot of arguments is disagreements over who should be driving the transaction. So who do you think it should be?
Well, I will tell you, I am a type A personality, and I always say me. That being said, my opinion is the escrow agent should not be the one driving the transaction. The escrow agent is there to support and to make sure that nothing, all the I's get dotted and the T's get crossed. I think that it's pretty obvious early on whether the other parties, the other lawyer, the broker, the other party's broker, are the type to drive the bus or not drive the bus. I will tell you, I put it on pretty early that I'd like to be in charge, and for the most part, people fall in line.
They're happy to get on your bus. Do you see? We saw an amazing year of two halves. Yeah, we saw it died, and then it suddenly came back. Are you seeing any signs of demand dropping now? This is usually the quiet period for you, isn't it?
It is. This is usually my time to, empty the baffles from the previous year and pay attention to my family so they don't hate me anymore. I apologize, Al. I lost my train of thought. What was that question again?
It was no, we lost the sound. Actually, it wasn't your fault. I don't think we lost the sound. Do you think we're seeing first-time buyers dry up?
Oh, so no, I don't think we've seen first-time buyers dry up yet. I think that we are towards the end. I think we're on the downswing. I will tell you, I have already fielded 2 calls from people that bought in the first half of 2020 looking to sell. And I think the first-time buyers might be drying up. We might be on that downswing. But my thought is we're going to be on an upswing with deals on the market in the next 4 to 5 months. And
we haven't even got the corporates back yet.
Right. Yeah. I had a client that purchased a Phenom 300 and was gung ho, and I think he maybe flew it 20 hours, and now he's trying to unload. He's not ready to unload it yet. It's not on the market yet. It's not even pre-market yet, so don't call me yet, brokers. But he's stunned by the cost of managing and operating the airplane.
It's because he's not flying enough.
Exactly.
We've got a question from Terry Spreece. Has working together shortened transaction times? And if so, by how many days?
I would say yes, because everyone in transactions where the team is working together very closely, yes, because you have less turnaround. So the inspection, everybody's watching the inspection reports, the interim reports more closely, so you know what the discrepancies are going to be. Technical acceptances are being signed on the spot. Turnaround times to get documents, everybody says 3 to 5 days to position documents or to accept or reject. And those are really being shortened. I would say on average, my transactions not involving lending are probably being lessened on average, I would say a good 5 to 7 days. I would venture that argument.
Which is astonishing when you think how in many ways, it's so much more complicated now.
Right. Right, but it just goes to show that if everyone is on top of it and kept informed and working towards the same goal of getting it closed, which most people are, that it can move pretty quickly.
If someone's watching this or listening on Spotify and they're thinking about buying an aircraft, what advice would you give them?
Very first advice, and this is going to surprise a lot of people for a lawyer to say this, but the first piece of advice is to find a broker in that market of what you're looking for, so that you can understand what is available to you and what your operating costs are going to be. As soon as you identify the make and model, then it's time to get your team. Don't wait and hire a lawyer after you've signed the APA. Please don't.
Great. That's great advice. And I think actually you'd be crazy not to get a broker and an aviation attorney.
Right.
That's brilliant. Kerri, stay with us, and we're now going to go over and get Rohit, but we'll come back to you straight away. We'll come back to you at the end first. Thank you.
All right.
Rohit, how are you?
Hi, Al. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. You're coming to us from New Delhi at the moment.
Yes, that's true. To New Delhi at the moment, about 8:30 p.m., 8:45 p.m. at the moment here.
And thanks for coming so late. And I know you don't follow cricket closely, but India's thrashing England at the moment.
Yeah, it's been a good day for India. Absolutely right. You guys need to buck up a bit.
What are you seeing in India and the Middle East and Southeast Asia?
So, you see, last year was a good year, but again, the most of our sales were driven from North America. I mean, at least about 75-80% came in from there. It's too early in the year to say whether something is going to change this year. We are seeing some trends coming in from Southeast Asia at the moment. The problem is we are not able to actually make physical contact and visit these countries to find out, unless you go there to get a ground feel, meet people. It's all virtual. We're getting information, we're getting feedback. You're not very sure how it is. So let's see. I think a little early in the day to make a prediction how this market is going to be different this year as it was from last year. But I think we'll see some positive changes.
Are a lot of your customers waiting for the vaccine rollout?
Yes, quite a few, I think, and quite a few have already got the vaccine. Most people who are aircraft owners seem to have already got the vaccine. Some of them declare it, some don't, but I think they're traveling around confidently, and they do seem to have the vaccine. And
are you seeing any interest from corporates?
Yes, we are seeing some interesting corporates. I see some. I had some of my old clients who are actually using this time to upgrade. To be fair to them, they're in the vaccine manufacturing business, so this is a good time for them to spend money. But yeah, they are looking at upgradations. They are looking at moving in. Some corporates are. I see positive signs from the corporates.
I think India's doing a fantastic job manufacturing vaccines.
Yes.
Going back to what Kerri was saying about managing expectations, it's in the States you can still travel around, you can still meet face to face. In your region and in Europe, it's much harder. Are you finding it much harder to get deals closed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are finding it a challenge to get deals closed, and it's only taking longer than it used to. I mean, by all standards, this part of the world always took longer than the US or Europe to close deals. And the timelines have even got extended. So it's really managing expectations. We have to work closely with the buyers, sellers. I think patience and perseverance is the key here. You have to come out with out of the box solutions. I mean, just a simple thing like a visual inspection. I have somebody who wants to buy an aircraft from India, and visual inspection became such a huge issue as to, how do they come and visually inspect the aircraft? I had to convince the seller, the owner of the aircraft, to send the aircraft to Dubai, just for a day, so that somebody could travel from the US to see it. And finally, even the person who had to come from US couldn't make it. So a local maintenance agency in Dubai was tasked by the potential buyer to inspect the aircraft on his behalf. So I mean, we are seeing these kind of issues coming. I mean, obviously these are causing time delays.
If you're a seller in Asia or the Middle East, would you advise trying to move that aircraft to the States?
I always do. I always do advise that bring it to the States. That's where the market is. And if we can help them bring it to the States, and we offer them facilities such as, oversight, helping them take the aircraft, put it on and register, find them some low cost parking, hangarage, where it becomes easier to sell it. We do advise. I mean, some people are open to it. Some find it a little bit of a challenge to do that, because they have issues of moving the aircraft away. And the biggest concern that I find is what happens if this aircraft doesn't sell in the next 3 to 6 months. Then for me to bring it back into India or Middle East or Southeast Asia is a bigger challenge than to send it out. So we have to work with some out of the box solutions, saying that if you can't sell it, then we will give you inventory solutions or something like that. So like I said, there are various new ways that we are talking about now, which we would not have done about a year ago.
In the States, we're talking about new buyers coming into the market. Are you seeing first-time or concept buyers?
I am seeing first-time and concept buyers. We saw a few coming in, and some of them did actually manage to go the whole way and close a deal. I would say a fair amount of them were talking, exploring, but didn't really go the whole distance. But yes, some of them did, and I do get inquiries from new buyers, concept buyers, almost every month. People who are interested in finding out how it works.
Do you have an average for how long it takes a credible concept buyer to come in and close? Because it could be years, couldn't it?
I would say definitely nothing less than about a year. It takes time. I mean, the last person I was talking to was the fastest, and he took about 8 to 9 months. But they are taking long. They try and understand it. Obviously, also first-time concept buyers don't understand, in this part of the world, don't understand the concept of brokers and how brokers can help them. So quite a few of them just kind of reach out to everybody who's out there, and with no offense meant, to the pilots, to the engineers, to the advisors, and they end up getting so much of information that they get confused. So we always tell them, choose your broker and just work with the broker. You'll get good advice. Some take that advice, some don't.
Yeah, once you've chosen the broker, stop looking.
Exactly. And, too much information can always confuse the client.
We've got another question from Terry Sprees. Are the Indian aviation authorities, or I'm going to phrase it politically, how are Indian aviation authorities viewing business aviation at the moment? I know you've personally been very involved in a lot of it.
Right. So my ex role as the president of the Business Aircraft Operators Association in India. I founded that association almost 10 years ago. We've been working closely with the Indian Aviation Authority. I mean, I would say we've made some progress, but not as much as we thought we could over the years. Obviously, I'm not involved in that anymore. We have very capable people who look after it now. But somewhere it's an issue on perception, more on anything else. I mean, and this perception issue is worldwide. It's not just specific to India. But I think India is a little more pronounced. Being a third world country, and where how private aviation sometimes is viewed as something which only the rich use and not so much as a business tool. So we've been struggling with some parts of it. Taxations are high. You buy an aircraft as privately as Part 91, equivalent to Part 91, you could end up paying as almost 30% of tax on it, which is a huge killer for a deal. So we work with those challenges. Operationally, I think we move forward. Some key issues to make operations easier have been addressed, but the broader issue of making it tax friendly, easier to own, for companies to invest in it is still a challenge.
So finally, what advice would you give to a first-time buyer?
Well, I said this to you on last time, and I say it again. The best advice I give to a first-time buyer is choose the person who you're going to work with, whether it's your broker or whoever it is, and have faith in that person. Is one big advice. and make sure that you understand what really are you getting into. Understand the costs, understand, it's not only buying it, what it takes to run it, because I always say there is nothing worse publicity than somebody buying an aircraft and selling it off in the next 6 months because, they couldn't sustain the expenses. That's bad publicity for the business. So I always try and give them as much information and transparency of costs that I can.
Unless you're flipping it, and then that's okay. We've got a question from Michael Godden, CEO of Flightline Aviation. What is the most popular business aircraft type in India?
So I think we do have a lot of citations in India. We have a lot of hawkers. That's at the small to mid size. We have Falcons on the super mid size. A fair amount of Falcon 2000s. And I think on the ultra long range, they are a fair amount of global 6000s and 5000s.
Okay, brilliant. Rohit, thanks so much, and thanks for staying up as well.
Thank you, Al. Thanks. Pleasure to speak with you as always.
Thank you. And now Janine is busy. She's rushing off to go and do a closing. Sorry, it's not closing, a showing, isn't it?
Showing, yes.
Out and about. What are you seeing at the moment, Janine?
Well, I'm back on the road. After sitting it out for most of last year, some requirements for transactions necessitated my presence there, and I found I really enjoyed it. Okay, it's a different environment, particularly when you're going to a service center. There's protocols in place, there's limitations, there's not so much ease of access, but it makes a huge difference on, I think, how the transaction runs. The level of awareness that all the parties, at least the parties that I represent, keep them apprised of how things are progressing. So I see pent-up demand among the trade to want to get back out there, which I think is a good thing. And now it's just a matter of how do we safely manage that until everyone's vaccinated.
I feel it as well. And I think we all want to get out and about. How are you finding buyer and seller expectations at the moment? Are buyers going, or let's change it, are sellers reading the headlines about private aviation and going, my jet must be worth more?
I haven't run into too much of that quite yet, because I'm not sure that an experienced aircraft owner, someone who's bought and sold over time, believes those headlines that much. They're smart enough to reach out to their advisor and say, why don't you give me an evaluation of what the market looks like, what the value of my own aircraft is relative to the current times that we're in. And second to that is, what can I buy and at what price? So I'm not seeing a lot of this overzealous or thought process that because there's high demand, my aircraft is suddenly worth more.
And buyers, what are they saying to you?
Well, I'm still dealing with a lot of first-time buyers, so they don't know what they're doing. They are drinking from a fire hose in terms of the information that they're gathering. I deal with one particular first-time buyer I'm working with, a great person. We're exploring still the options that are available, but he can't stay off the internet. and I will open my inbox in the morning and see a list of aircraft that he highlighted and sent me the links to and says, what do you think of this and that? So the new first-time buyer is still like a curious child, exploring, sometimes getting into a little bit of trouble, but most of the time running back home to their advisor and saying, help me out of this sort of dilemma there. Experienced buyers, very cautious at this time. Most of my clientele are well situated, and nothing's changed in terms of their planning programs, whether it was 1 or 2 years into the future or 6 months. Nobody's accelerated that to look to take advantage of an opportunity or divest themselves of their aircraft because they see there's an opportunity.
Do you see that changing? Do you see when, touch wood, the world opens up again, do you see people rushing to get an aircraft? Because, if you want one by the summer, you haven't actually got that much time.
Well, but I think we've seen that already. I think we saw that in 2020. There were many drivers that brought the buyers out into the marketplace, but I think part of it was the realization that if not travel itself, but their own personal approach to travel has changed. And therefore, they were not going to defer or wait as to how to fulfill an uplift need. So now I'd have to echo Kerri a little bit. It's starting to trickle off. People are settling down. Maybe we're finally going to get that mid or late first quarter breather. And I think we're going to go back to business as usual. And I say that with caution, in part because we have diminished inventory and not necessarily what's available for sale, but I'm just thinking over production for the last 10 years. So perhaps we have a diminished quantity of fairly recent production aircraft. That will tighten the market unto itself.
Are you getting anyone coming to you looking to buy new?
Not really. I mean, I have people who have explored the idea with me and then compare it to an aircraft that's 2-3 years old. In some cases, they'll step back 10. What the focus is really on is meeting current transportation requirements. And if they're not time sensitive or age sensitive, then they'll look at an in-service airplane. They'll look at the pedigree, and that gets closer consideration. I mean, really, my area of expertise is in the pre-owned marketplace, but it's not that we don't take a look at brand new and weigh the value of new versus pre-owned.
That's great. Renee's saying how eloquent you're being, Renee Bangersdorf from Charlie Bravo. One of the problems when you get new entrants into the market is that it's easy for them to be misadvised. And there's always a worry, isn't there, that and I've spoken to a couple of new entrants who are not happy with transparency in the industry. Do you see anything changing? Do you think it's getting better or worse or not changing?
Well, I don't think much has changed yet other than let me rephrase that. It's certainly on the radar scope with a select group of people. I think if we're going to talk about transparency, I think it's a broad subject, particularly when it comes to our industry. And there are some people pushing that agenda. I guess I'd have to say I'm one of those people because it's gotten to a point where if I can't trace back who is the real owner of this airplane, it doesn't make me happy. If I find out there are suddenly participants in the transaction financially that we weren't aware of, that doesn't make me happy. I mean, let's put it on the table and let's talk about it, because ultimately the responsibility is to my client. And the party that I represent should know where that money is going and who is involved in the deal, who's an influencer in the transaction if they're playing that kind of role. As far as new buyers misadvised, I mean, I'm going to be as bold as say in some cases misled based on some people that I've spoken with. And this kind of harks back to the topic that's been brought up already by the two previous speakers, is knowing what it's going to cost to continue to operate the aircraft. That is the biggest challenge I find in the educational process, because people are coming into the marketplace, individuals mostly, that have an idea as to what the purchase price is, but never ever consider what their ongoing costs are going to be. And when I start down that path of trying to educate them, they're just shocked. And in some cases, they've let me know that they've already spoken with a flight crew member, a management company who has definitely downplayed what their out-of-pocket exposure might be. And there was a story I heard recently through another advisor telling me that they were counseling. It was more along the lines of tax than anything else. And they were listening to these parties who were going to go half and half on an airplane. And it was much larger than I know that this person was originally considering. And the advisor wisely looked at a projected due list and said, do you realize you have this big inspection coming up within X amount of period of time? And they were like, not really. And the manager quickly said, oh, it's only going to cost X. Well, because that person had some familiarity with the out-of-pocket might be, counseled them differently. And I don't think the deal ever went through. But I hear of stories like that all the time. In the rush to try to grab new clients, there's sometimes some information being left out of the equation.
And if you're a new buyer listening to that, that's scary.
It should be.
So what should they do?
Well, they should put a team together, starting with the broker, right? And let me add, not just put a team together, but let me suggest they check credentials and references. Don't just give it lip service and, and receive something. Actually, a referral is obviously the best way to do business, but you should go deeper than that. But you definitely need to put a team together. A broker is there to serve one purpose, and I've often said that the broker ultimately evolves into the project manager. Aviation experienced attorney, absolute. I don't think I'll ever do another deal again where both parties are represented. And certainly I've encountered that in the course of my career. A technical advisor, I think that's handy if they don't already have someone employed or they have not already figured out how they're going to place the aircraft into service. And let's say it's a management company that has maintenance staff, then they need to hire someone who has a particular expertise in that make and model of airplane.
Great. We've got a comment from Shelley at First Republic Bank. Thank you, Janine, for educating your clients on not just the initial cost, but the ongoing cost to own and operate an aircraft. She's saying you're always well spoken. And Nell Stubbs at Conklin and Dedeker. Thank you for opening people's eyes. Actual cost is always an eye-opener for the new business owner.
Yeah, we want to keep our clients. I want to keep my client. I want to see my client happy and perhaps trading up, doing additional business. And very important for new business development is referring me onward.
Same question I asked Red here. How long would you see the average from a new buyer inquiry to them getting their aircraft?
How long a period of time? Well, a year is a good barometer. I'm working with a couple that it's 6 months in now and we haven't done anything. We still have the educational process going on. The fastest transaction I ever did with first-time buyer was 3 months. And that was literally from introduction to, well, let me rephrase this, to contracted and pre-buy. It took a little bit longer to get the deal done. And that was in good times. I tend to slow everyone down, and I get accused of slowing things down. And my favorite line is time kills deals. But especially with the first-time buyer, I want to make sure that they are fully aware of everything that they're getting themselves into.
That's a really interesting angle, because clearly everyone else is rushing a buyer before they lose concentration and go off and buy a yacht or another house or a company.
I don't know.
Sorry, Janine, I missed that.
I said, I don't know who they're talking to.
What other advice would you give, apart from team, to someone looking at business aviation for the first time?
Well, it's a huge expenditure. It's a life-changing move on their part. I deal with a lot of entrepreneurs, predominantly gentlemen as opposed to ladies. And if they have a significant other in their life, I kind of suggest to make sure everybody's on board, not just the company, but the family. And generally they are by the time they get to this phone call. But I develop really close relationships with the vast majority of my clients, and I get to know them beyond just let's do business. And so I want to make it a happy experience for everyone who's involved. So, it's not really earth-shattering sort of advice, but I think it makes for a happy everybody going forward.
I think you're missing a trick, because I think a divorce is a chance to sell 2 jets.
Well, I didn't say I don't handle those.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Janine.
Thank you.
And last, but in no means least, delighted to go to Joe Carfagna Jr., President Leading Edge, who I've muted, Joe, so you need to unmute. That's my fault.
There we
and
are.
I'm guessing you're in the office.
Yes.
This isn't the living room backdrop.
No.
What are you seeing at the moment, Joe?
I think for the immediate situation that we're seeing is the supply of airplanes is not very plentiful. And it's all a direct result of the frenzy that took place at the end of the year last year. It is beginning to repopulate, but we have some clients that have some interest in buying airplanes at the moment, mostly bigger airplanes, and there's just not a very good supply of them. And we've told them to be patient because we don't know what this year's got in store for it yet with respect to, at least here in the United States, with tax law. That could change, and if it does, it will directly affect this market one way or another, depending upon what's announced, or if nothing's announced. So it's that part remains to be seen, but definitely the supply is a bit of an issue at the moment. There's not enough of it. And
is that higher end, newer aircraft? You can still find an old aircraft if you want it.
Yes, later model intercontinental airplanes, even though they were the poster children for how values crashed in 2020, the amount of them that got snapped up in November and December was large. And it's definitely left its mark now as to what's left. That when we look at what's left, well, there's airplanes left, but they're the airplanes that were not picked over at the time for a reason. How they're configured, where they're located, what their pedigree is, et cetera, et cetera. So that if you look down the list, there's still an ample list. It's just not a list of particularly good airplanes.
We didn't see corporates really, obviously there's some exceptions, but we didn't really see the corporates, which have been a key part of so many markets, super mid, large aircraft in the States, buy or sell last year. Did we?
Not really. I have to say, of all the transactions that we did last year, less than 10% of them were corporate. They were a vast majority of wealthy individuals or privately held smaller companies that were taking advantage of market conditions, which is what we probably saw more than anything else, was people trying to take advantage of either A, the market conditions in the summer, or B, the tax benefit situation at the end of the year. So both of those buyers, whether I don't want to go on the airlines, I don't want to, I want to make a great deal on an airplane, which you could do over the course of the summer, and then I want to get the tax benefit. Those people that make those, where their decisions are driven by those three things, are not corporate buyers. They're individuals.
Do you see, you talk to corporates and corporate customers, and
sure.
I'm guessing the consensus is that they'll probably start traveling in the third quarter properly.
Yeah, I think we're going to see corporate start to travel again in the third quarter, but they're going to be behind. The people that will start traveling first are a lot of us that are on this chat. The people that run smaller businesses that have to go press the flesh to make something happen effectively. Those folks are going to travel. And I think the first thing that we're going to see that will be a result from that, it will be how underserved their need to travel for business is going to be by the airlines. That's not readily apparent yet, but just wait. Just wait till we've got a fair amount of vaccinated people, and it's about June. And the typical business traveler who said, boy, I haven't been on an airplane since March of last year. I think I'm going to go visit my favorite client in Kansas City, who I have not seen in a year. And they realize that they used to be able to get to Kansas City directly. Now they've got a connecting flight each way, and they're going to have a meeting one day, and they're going to fly. They'll fly there one day, have the meeting the second day, and fly home the third day. So it's a 3-day event to do something that might have been a 1-day event prior. And I think once that becomes readily apparent to the world, because it isn't yet, let's just say that's in the summer, it becomes readily apparent how difficult it is for the small business person to start traveling. I think we're going to see another, and these will be individuals again or privately held companies, there'll be another upswing in the purchase of airplanes, if all else remains constant. I think we'll see another tick up in airplane sales when people realize they can't get there from here. And the airlines are not going to ramp up that scenario anytime soon. That's going to have a lag effect that we'll all experience.
And actually, probably the procedure of turning up to an airport is going to get even worse for a while.
Probably. Yeah, it rarely gets better. So
it's interesting. I was talking to NetJets earlier this week, and they're exactly the same. They saw individuals come in, buy shares. They didn't see corporates cancel shares. They stuck with them, but they're not yet seeing the urgency. If you're a corporate who wants to start traveling, you can buy your share in June or July or September. It's not the same if you want an aircraft, is it? If you want an aircraft for the third quarter, you haven't got that much time.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and it just has that longer period of time. What we did see in 20, and it's hard to say how much of it we will continue to see this year, but what we did see in 20 was essentially like a game of leapfrog, where the charter consumer suddenly it was all about how do you get more control over the asset itself and fly with less people on board with less exposure. So the charter customer became a fractional customer. The fractional customer thought about buying their own airplane. And the person that chartered their airplane out when they weren't using it maybe stopped doing that, said, I don't want anybody in my airplane anymore. So if you say everything moved up or moved to the right, so to speak, one notch, wouldn't surprise me if we see that again with the necessity of business travel with the smaller business owner.
Unless there's a tax change.
Unless there is a tax change. And so the tax change in the U.S., the way that, I think a couple ways to look at it, the Trump tax bill, when it went into effect at the end, it went in at the very end of 2017, and they made it retroactive to September of 17. So basically, anyone who purchased an airplane for about 2 or 3 months prior got the benefit. I only remember this so distinctly because we had a customer who missed it by about 2 weeks because we didn't know at the time that this was going to get passed. And we purchased an airplane in the middle of September, and it actually became retroactive September 28th. So the question I think that's truly at hand that we have to watch is as soon as the talk ramps up about changes in the tax bill, watch the rhetoric about loopholes and corporate jet owners. Nobody ever feels sorry for the corporate jet owner. I mean, it's just not part of how society works anywhere in the world. So the corporate jet owner is, if they are perceived as having loopholes, which is expensing an airplane 100% and writing a $10 million purchase off and getting the full expense against the $10 million, at least in the United States, that goes away. The question, under that Trump tax bill, it's good till 2023. So if they don't touch it, it is good through 2023 under the current rules. If they do change it, the question I think we really have to watch is, will it be retroactive to January 1st of 21, meaning that everybody who bought after January 1st, 21 will not qualify for this 100% expensing? Or will they say, we will make it forward acting January 1st of 22, and then if that's the case, we're going to have a year that will be like the last half of 20 for the rest of the time of 21. It'll be a very robust market in the United States, if indeed that's the case. So that's something I'm watching very closely because it's going to steer what happens for us more than anything else.
But you won't know it could happen at any time, could it?
It's just start listening, because right now, Biden has his hands full with lots of other things, and this is not on the, changing tax rule is not on the top of the pile yet, but it's going to eventually get there. Between that and some of the initiatives for climate change will also affect our industry at some point in time. Not yet, but it will.
So you made the mistake of bringing up tax, which means you then get questions on tax. And there's one from Hannah Davis at Globaljet Capital. How do ultra high net worths with primarily personal travel meet the QBU threshold for tax benefits?
I think the answer to that one is we don't quite know yet. and that sounds like a dodgy answer. I'll tell you why. What we did see a lot of in 2019 and 2020 are the purchasers that were high net worth individuals that wanted to try to get the benefits. They bought the airplanes in the latter part of the year and then flew the airplane 1 or 2 or 3 times, all business trips, and then their advisor puts it on the books as a fully expensable item. And then the question that presents itself is, well, what are they going to do about this going forward the following year and the year after and the year after until that asset is sold? Technically the IRS could look at all this and claw back and say that depreciation that you took in 2019, you didn't qualify for the remaining years that you operated the airplane. We want our money. So I can't say that I've been hearing about that happen, and I'm not in the tax advising business, but I haven't heard that that's been happening at all, but that could happen.
Great. You've got another question from Stephen Kelly at Global AVX. Joe, what do you think are the reasons why there were so many transactions in the intercontinental large jet market at the end of last year?
If we look back at what happened in March and April and May of 20, globals of every variety, Gulfstreams of the larger varieties, the big Falcons, they really all got clobbered in about the same way, which was about a 20% reduction in price. And the lighter jets, turboprops, really only saw a reduction in value that was anywhere in the 5%, maybe 10 in some cases, but the big jets really got clobbered. So what happened over the course of the summer and in towards the latter part of the year was when people looked at it and said, well, this G550 that I was thinking about buying for $20 million last year now costs $16.5. And it's only 6 months later or whatever it may be. I think even though people are not going to use those airplanes right now for what they can do, meaning that people aren't flying in an intercontinental fashion, it's still the old-fashioned 2.5 people for 2.5 hours within the United States is the large cabin airplane buyer. But they'll say, I'll buy this airplane because I know in 6 months or a year, what have you, I will start trying flying internationally again. But I think it's just any time that high net worth people, especially those that are already airplane owners, and most people who would buy something like a large cabin airplane are already an airplane owner, they will swoop in when the time's right to capitalize on the market to make a very good deal on an airplane because they're experienced.
Right, I've got really good news. Nell Stubbs at Conklin Dudecka approves of your response.
Well, that I guess that means I may know what I think I'm talking about. I hope.
She says, great response. We've not seen any audits yet, so until we see an audit, we still don't know how deep the IRS will look at this issue.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's good news.
So you've passed the Nell Stubbs seal of approval. Joe, what advice would you give to a new buyer?
Right now, it would just be have a little patience because of the lack of the supply. Don't rush and back to what Janine was saying, same thing earlier is, don't rush. Well, the best way to make a client happy usually is to slow the transaction down if it's needed and show them that you're not looking to make the fee quickly. You're looking to make the transaction be the right one under the right terms at the right price, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think right now it's back to a little bit of patience. And at the end of 2020, when people were trying to get those deals in, patience wasn't the answer. The answer, we did certain things that we would never do under different types of circumstances. But in order to get that tax benefit in on a $10 or $15 million purchase or $20 million purchase, you look at that and say, well, doing some sort of pre-purchase inspection before we close, because it's December 12th and you didn't come to us in June, you came to us 3 days ago to buy an airplane. There's no time to do this now. So if you want to take the risk of binding the seller that they are going to leave $1 million in escrow and hold money back, and you can do a pre-buy in January. That's the only way that we can get the airplane purchased. And I can't say that we've ever done that. Maybe once or twice in my 26 years of doing this, we did something like that. But we did one of those at the end of the year this past year. And it was all because the tax benefit absolutely trumped the risks of buying a late model, good pedigree airplane that we knew was a good airplane. It would only have to be a surprise that would surprise us all if something was wrong with it. So they went ahead and did all of that, and it all worked out just fine. But I didn't know what else to suggest to them. I said, you realize that we're going against the grain. We're going to go to page 27 of the aircraft brokerage manual. It says, don't do this. But if the tax benefit was the driver, then you do this. And so it was just a very strange time back then. But going to answer your question now, it takes a little more patience now because the supply is less.
Is now a good time to be an OEM?
I think so, personally. I think if I had to say that the OEMs are going to have a better time in 2021 and 2 versus the years prior, I think they're going to be okay because the availability of airplanes in the used market directly affects their ability to sell new airplanes. And when we talk about those drops in values that occurred in the middle of 20, where it was anywhere between, say, 5 and 20%, the OEMs cannot react to that one. They cannot reduce their pricing to be consistent with the used market. They have to just step back. And they have to just step back and say, we just have to wait this out. And that's kind of what they did. And I think now that it's back to some sense of normalcy, I personally think that they're going to see some better times in 21 and 2 because the fundamental thing is that the demand is still going to be there. Vaccine or not, I still don't want to go on the airlines. I can't get there on the airlines. The airlines underserve what I need. And the overall demand for airplanes remains decent. And if it does, the OEMs will sell airplanes.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks so much, Joe. Oh, we've got a question. I'll just check. We've got lots of questions. Cryptocurrencies. Does anyone want to talk about cryptocurrencies?
Not it.
Not it.
Kerri, if I came to you and said I wanted to do a deal in Bitcoin?
This would be my response. I would figure out a way to make it work, but it would slow down the transaction because I don't have any idea. I'd have to educate myself first.
Yeah, I think the other problem is when it's so volatile, it's not ideal. Yeah, it's great. Okay, final takeaways. We've talked a lot about first-time buyers. Obviously, a lot of people listening to this are in the industry. Janine, what message would you want to give to your industry colleagues?
About 2021? This is going to be a better year. I'm going to be more positive and upbeat for everyone. I think this is going to be a better year. We've learned a lot about ourselves, about how we do business, about our clients. We have a takeaway on what really worked, what didn't work. And I think lately I've been articulating the need for the human connection. And to Joe's comment with regards to people are just not going to get on the airlines, people are going to get on their private planes. And the trade is going to get back on the airlines if we're not on our own private planes to go see our clients. So I see the light at the end of the tunnel, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
That's great. Although you realise there isn't a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, ever.
Please, don't destroy me.
Rohit, what's your thing you'd share with the industry?
So, I think the last year has taught us some new ways of doing business, which are here to stay. Never could I have thought that I would have a client who would buy a $50 million jet without even having a look at it. But we've had such instances last year. I think some of these new models are here to stay. So that's good news. That's good news. I think it will make international transactions better. And probably people will approach them with more flexible mind. So it's all positive. I think, and I agree with Janine. I think 2021 has something better in store for us than 2022. So very optimistic.
Joe?
I agree. I think 21 overall is better. Matter of fact, just thinking out loud here, all of us know plenty of people now that have been vaccinated. And then you combine that with the amount of people that have had COVID within the last several months, and the amount of people that now have the immunity right now walking around is approximately 20-25% of the population of the United States. So by the time it's May, that number will be 50. And I think people's attitudes are really going to change.
Let's hope so. Kerri, final thought.
Well, I hate being the final thought and not be as rosy as my panel members, but I think that yes, we're going to see great stuff in 2021, but I do think that some things are going to be a little harder because we're going to have a lot of people that got into airplanes that shouldn't have gotten into them. And that is going to make the transactions different because we're all used to people generally being excited about getting into a new airplane. We're going to have some sellers that are not as upbeat as we're accustomed to. But I'm going to end on a positive note and say 2021 is going to be killer for all of us. It's going to be a great year.
The other big story in the market, apart from the buyers, is money coming in. We've got SPACs, we've got buyers of signature. Which of you, Joe, will you be buying Wheels Up shares?
Well, that's a great question. I think I'll answer that by saying historically, if we look back at all the money that's ever gotten pumped into this industry from the outside, big, non-aviation people coming in and investing money in aviation, I'm going to guess that the track record of the return is not that great. Going back to even all those years when Warren Buffett bought NetJets, really when you look at how was his return over all that period of time, he's a buy and hold. And how really was his return all these years later? It would be arguably, it would be less than what he figured. So I think this is good for the industry because the money's coming in, the press is being drawn to it, and ultimately this is good for our industry. But how much money will be made by the outside people that are coming in here? That's what I question, and that remains to be seen.
Rohit, you lived through this as a hawker, Beechcraft rep.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Sorry, is that question to me?
Yeah. What do you think of money coming into the industry? And are you in?
Yeah, it's always positive. I mean, it's great for the business. I think money coming in is great. Would I be putting that money in? I kind of agree with Joe. When I put my own money, I've got to see what's going to get me the best returns. So I'm not very sure whether I'm going to be putting my money in buying shares for aviation companies, but it's good for the business. What's wrong with that?
Kerri?
Am I going to be buying Wheels Up shares? I'm a worker bee, Al. I'm not going to be. I think Wheels Up is I've been watching the industry news on what they're doing, and I think what they're doing is very intriguing. I haven't given any real thought about investing and purchasing those shares, but I have to go with Joe. I'd be very interested to see what kind of out-of-industry money is coming into it and how that impacts that out-of-industry infusement on the long term.
And Janine, finally for you.
Well, let me put it this way. If there's any investors out there or anyone looking to scale their business and need to add an aircraft sales component, they need to come talk to me. I can to sell share.
I'm looking forward to the SPAC that buys you, Janine. Thanks so much, Joe from Leading Edge, Kerri from Air Law Office, and also thanks so much for